So, we're finally back to do the breakdown for the most recent episode of My Hero Academia, and this episode is the beginning of probably one of the best fights in the series, and we'll get right into it right now. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Andrew, and I'm here to do my episode breakdown and review for My Hero Academia Season 7, Episode 12. And there's a fair amount that we need to break down and review in this episode when it comes to what's happening with Bakugo, what's happening at other locations around the battlefield, and what is going to be happening with Deku and his confrontation with Tomura All For One. All of that and more will be discussed in this video, so let's dive right into it. And to start off, the episode covers approximately 4 chapters, from chapter 363 all the way to chapter 366, covering 363, 364, 365, and 366. And the title of the episode, Those Who Defend, Those Who Violate, actually comes from the manga chapter of 363. And the episode begins with a reestablishment of a cut scene from the end of chapter 357, where we get a little bit of added dialogue and clarification of Deku talking to the first user, Yoichi, of One For All. As we see that they're having a conversation about a bad feeling happening with All For One, as we do get to see some individuals coming towards the location of Deku, and the reasoning why we get it in this episode is to tie into the ending of Deku's arrival in this episode. But from there, we cut over and we get Monoma and the other characters reacting to Bakugo's death with some added action sequences to really establish that as they are fighting, they are compensating for the fact that Bakugo has lost his life. And something else that the anime does in a more clearer detail is that we get to see Best Jeanist clearly trying to save and repair Bakugo's heart and try and save his life. And as that is happening, we do get the scene from the manga of Midako having a very nice scene confronting Tomura All For One, as All For One is monologuing as we cut over to the different locations, getting to see what happens after All For One is giving his speech about killing Bakugo in this moment. So, one of the cuts that we go over to is that we cut over to Kamino, where we see that Dabi is back in action as we see that he burns Kido and Onima. And something interesting about this scene in the anime is that the burn scene on Kido and Onima are a little bit less severe in the anime in comparison to what we saw in the manga. As well as we get some confirmation that Dabi was able to copy Shoto's phosphor ability right before the ice attack landed, and that we're actually able to see that his version of phosphor has a purple tint across his chest, which is something that you most likely saw in the anime opening itself, but it's just a cool combination of his red and blue fire. And as this is happening, we also get to see Dabi calling for Skeptic as we see the Nomu coming back into action as it arises from the ground. As well as we get a small short scene from the manga animated into the anime of Skeptic as he is touting his beliefs about Reed Destro, as we also get to see his actions as we see him beginning to hack into the flying coffin, as well as the escape pods that should have been under UA. And as well as from that scene with Skeptic, we do get the scene that we saw in the manga where we get to see the spies of All For One getting information that will lead to something later on in the season, as we also get the re-establishment of the other Todoroki family members, as well as the supporters of Bakugo and Todoroki via the kids who they interacted with during their remedial course arc. And it's very important that we did get these scenes put in the anime, because these are going to be scenes that we're going to see later on, if not in this season, in the next season. But going from there, we also cut to Gunga Mountain as we see that All For One is being revived using Aries' rewind quirk. And we pretty much get similar dialogue between the anime and the manga when it comes to Dr. Garaki explaining what he did when it came to Aries' quirk and pretty much reconverting the quirk erasing bullets into this new substance that allowed for All For One to regain his older body. As we also get a pseudo declaration of the doctor's affection for All For One, as it's done in a cool transition between him talking and himself into the recording as it transitions over to the actual recording that All For One is hearing. And as we get this, we get a little bit of more confirmation of what's going on with All for One, and that the body that he's in right now is at his peak prime form, as we get a lot of cool animation of him falling towards the ground very smoothly, as well as we see him taking the clothing off of these heroes, as well as stealing the quirk of a fellow hero at this moment. And as this is happening, we do get a scene of Hawks coming in to save a fellow hero, but a difference between this scene and the scene in the manga is that in the manga, we also see that he was able to injure All for One on the face, as we get a clearer understanding of All for One's rewind healing him. And that's not something that we get clarity in the anime. However, we are going to get more clarifications of how this rewind is working within the future episodes in this season. But even with there, before we cut away to another location, we do have Hawks trying to figure out how to stall for time as he asks All for One about his dream, as All for One pretty much states that his dream is to make sure that no one has a future. And this future talk is very important, cutting over to a brand new location that we haven't seen in the series so far, Washington, D.C. As we get Akbar, or as we get clarification, Timothy Akbar, talking and arguing with the president against what they need to do when it comes to their involvement with All for One, and what it means for the entire country for the future, and how this is connected to the previous scene, as Akbar tries to convey to the government that when it comes to what adults are supposed to do, that they are supposed to protect and support the children and their future, which once again leads into a nice transition where we get the next scene back at the coffin of Best Jeanist and Edshot, where we see that Edshot is pretty much putting those ideals into motion by coming towards the location of Best Jeanist to try and attempt to save Bakugo, because Bakugo is the future, and as an adult, he's wanting to protect that future. And at this moment, we get to see Edshot trying to save Bakugo with his own body, as we get to see a explanation and a slight expansion of the history between Best Jeanist and Edshot, where we see that they both went to UA and were a part of a somewhat sewing club, but that it was not expanded that much in comparison to what we saw in the manga. But in the anime, we do get to see a more clear version of the poster for their club, and that the reasoning why we got this scene most likely is based off some volume extras that we got that expanded the scene and really showed their connection more in the manga and the volume extras, which is why it was added to the anime. But from this point on, we do get to see Edshot beginning to fix Bakugo's heart, as well as getting clarification that Best Jeanist was able to sew up the heart but not stop the bleeding. As well as we get the very infamous bubble that Edshot got from Wash, which we still have no idea how or when he actually got this, and that this is very much an issue with the plot as a whole. But even then, we do get a re-explanation of Edshot's quirk Folder Body, and how we get a confirmation that by him becoming as thin as it is very much treading on his life force. However, I want to point out, and something that I really like, is the clear and added animation scene of Edshot actually pumping Bakugo's heart, aka giving CPR from the inside. That is something that we saw in the manga, but it wasn't very clearly shown until we got it in the anime. But from here, we're beginning to approach the end of the episode, where Tomura All for One is very much angry as we get some great animation fight sequences with Mirko and Muriel fighting against him. And we do see the brutality of this fight and the determination of Mirko, as we see that she clearly loses an arm in this fight and lands a Lunar Rush that does more damage in the anime than it did in the manga. And as Tomura is reflecting on why he is staggering and why he was able to be instilled by fear by Bakugo and his attack, we get the confirmation that he's going through a second transformation, as we get Tenko's speech about how no one was able to lend him a hand, as we see the hands begin to cover his body and extend his arm into a giant fist, basically creating armor around him, as we begin to see him demolish the rest of the heroes, as Tomura All for One begins to ignore Muriel and the heroes try and stop him but fail. And as all seems lost, we do get the scene from the manga of Mandalay telling the heroes to stall for 2 more seconds as the barrier comes down, and how Mirio uses his experience with Night Eye and his want to make a world filled with smiles and laughter. It's able to stall All for One with a peachy keen butt shot, which does cause All for One to have a small little laughter as Deku comes in with the final part of the episode to save the day with a giant smash, which ties into why the cut scene was added to the beginning of this episode to punctuate the end of this. And yeah, that's pretty much the entirety of this episode for My Hero Academia Season 7 Episode 12. All in all, this was a really good episode. Not as good as the previous ones, and probably not as great as the next one coming up, but I think that it was a solid episode with a fair amount of good animations, very minimal use of flashbacks that were very intrusive, and pretty much overall animates everything from the manga faithfully and doing it in a way that is enjoyable. But yeah, that's all I really have to say for this episode. And let me ask you this. How did you feel about the episode? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And was there anything that I missed in this breakdown? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!